Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Prophet Samuel 2, chapter 11 in a clear and simple way, step by step. So, we're looking at a truly pivotal, dramatic moment in the text today. We're going to examine the narrative mechanics of what actually happens when a series of seemingly small, everyday decisions rapidly snowball into an absolute tragedy.
Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. We'll be walking through this chapter chronologically. We'll start by setting the scene, look at David and Bathsheba, the failed cover-up, the tragic plot, the aftermath and displeasure, and finally wrap up with some lessons and a recap. Let's get into it.
Section 1. Setting the scene, the spring campaign. Let's start right at verse 1 to get our context.
To understand this sheer gravity of what's about to unfold, you really have to catch the stark contrast presented in the very first sentence of the chapter. The text specifically tells us it's spring. Now, in the ancient world, spring is the time when kings usually go off to war. The weather is right, the roads are passable. But King David doesn't go. Instead, he sends his commander, Joab, along with the king's men and the entire Israelite army. They're out there fighting the Ammonites, laying siege to the heavily fortified city of Rabbah. It's a massive regional conflict. But then the verse drops this highly specific, very deliberate detail: David remained in Jerusalem. He's staying behind in the absolute comfort of his palace while his men are out there in the trenches.
Section 2. David and Bathsheba, the escalation. In verses 2 through 5, we're going to see what happens because David wasn't where he was supposed to be.
I really want you to notice how incredibly fast this escalation happens. It starts on a pretty ordinary evening. David gets out of bed, takes a stroll on the roof of his palace. From up there, he looks down and sees a woman bathing, and the text explicitly notes she is very beautiful. But here's the thing. David doesn't just look away and go back inside. He takes a step. Seeing leads to inquiring. He sends someone to find out who she is. And once he learns her identity, that inquiring leads straight to action. He sends messengers, brings her to the palace, and he sleeps with her before she goes back home. It's a total domino effect.
Now, the crucial point here is exactly what David learns when he makes that very first inquiry. The messenger comes back with a crystal clear report. He says, "Isn't this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" David is getting explicit, undeniable information that this woman is married. And not just to anyone. She's married to Uriah the Hittite. Now, the fact that Uriah is a Hittite, meaning he's a foreigner who has completely assimilated and serves loyally in Israel's army, makes this betrayal so much deeper. Because where is Uriah right now? He's out fighting the exact same war that David decided to stay home from. But despite this massive, glaring red flag, David just proceeds anyway.
And this brilliantly and tragically illustrates the major turning point of the chapter in verse 5. Bathsheba conceives, and she sends a brief message to David. "I am pregnant." In English, it's just 3 little words, but you can imagine the sheer panic they caused. The implications are literally massive. This single unavoidable message shatters any illusion of secrecy and officially triggers the rest of the tragic events we're about to see.
Section 3. The failed cover-up. David's plan A. Moving into verses 6 through 13, David is now facing a full-blown crisis.
So, David comes up with a scheme, and it's highly methodical. Step 1, he sends word to his commander, Joab, on the battlefield saying, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." Step 2, Uriah arrives, and David plays it totally cool. He asks him all these casual questions, how's Joab doing? How are the troops holding up? How's the war going? Just making small talk. Then step 3, David tells Uriah to go down to his house and wash his feet. Back then, this was just a polite, customary way of saying, go home, relax, and be with your wife. David even sends a royal gift right behind him to sweeten the deal. The entire plan relies on Uriah going home and sleeping with Bathsheba, so that later, Uriah would just assume the baby was his.
But plan A fails almost immediately in verse 9, because Uriah doesn't go home. Instead, he sleeps right at the entrance to the palace with the king's servants. When David finds out the next morning, he asks Uriah, "Hey, you just came from a journey. Why didn't you go home?" And look at the incredible irony staring us in the face here. We've got this stark contrast. On one hand, you have David, the king of Israel, sleeping in a lavish palace, indulging his desires and scheming in secret. On the other hand, you have Uriah the Hittite, a foreign-born soldier, showing absolute, unwavering solidarity with the army. He completely refuses comfort. He's actually showing way more integrity and loyalty to Israel than the king of Israel himself.
Uriah's response to David in verse 11 is just incredibly powerful. Listen to this. He says, "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my master Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open fields. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and lie with my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing." Wow. Uriah is bound by this deep, unbreakable soldier's code of honor. In his mind, he simply cannot indulge in the cozy comforts of home while his brothers in arms are out there risking their lives in the dirt and the open fields.
Because Uriah is just so fiercely honorable, David realizes he has to turn things up a notch. He intensifies his efforts. He keeps Uriah in Jerusalem for another whole day. He invites Uriah over to eat and drink with him, and then he deliberately gets the man drunk. David is desperately trying to lower the soldier's inhibitions. But look at the result. Even when he's completely intoxicated, Uriah's righteous principles hold firm. When evening rolls around, he stumbles out, but he still sleeps on his mat among the servants. He absolutely refuses to go home. So, Plan A, it is a total, undeniable failure. Section 4. The tragic plot. The deadly letter. Because the cover-up failed, we're moving from deception straight into murder in verses 14 through 21.
The next morning, David sits down and writes a letter to his commander, Joab. And the contents of this letter are just chilling. Pure, cold-blooded calculation. It reads, "Put Uriah out in front where the fighting is fiercest, then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die." It's a direct execution order. But you know what the most tragic, heartbreaking detail of this entire chapter might be? It's how the letter actually gets to Joab. David hands it directly to Uriah. This loyal, honorable soldier literally carries his own sealed death warrant all the way back to the battlefield.
So Joab gets the letter, reads it, and he executes the plot. He assigns Uriah to a specific spot near the city wall where he knows the enemy defenders are the fiercest. The men of the city surge out to fight, and several of David's men fall in the skirmish, including Uriah. Now, Joab is an experienced commander. He knows that getting this close to a fortified city wall is a terrible, highly dangerous military tactic. You're completely exposed to archers and falling debris from above. So when Joab sends a messenger back to David to report the battle, he fully anticipates that David is going to blow up at him for this foolish maneuver. In fact, he preps the messenger. He says, look, if the king gets angry and asks, "Why did you get so close to the wall?" you just tell him, "Uriah the Hittite is dead."
Section 5. Aftermath and displeasure. The news delivered. Let's look at the immediate fallout, starting in verse 22.
The messenger arrives in Jerusalem and tells David exactly what Joab instructed him to say. He gives the full battle report, explaining that the enemy overpowered them, drove them back, and that archers shot from the wall, causing major casualties. He's laying out this military failure. But then, he drops the exact phrase Joab gave him to placate the king's anticipated anger. Moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. Joab successfully uses the confirmation of this secret murder to completely shield himself from any criticism regarding his bad military tactics.
And David's response in verse 25 is, quite frankly, hard to listen to. It's so deeply callous. He tells the messenger to go back and encourage Joab with these exact words. "Don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it." That phrase, "the sword devours one as well as another," is basically a dismissive idiom. It essentially means, hey, these things happen in war. People die. David is dismissing a targeted, orchestrated murder as just a standard casualty of conflict. It's a thoroughly hypocritical response, perfectly designed to make everything look like just another day at the office.
The end of the chapter races through this final, incredibly swift sequence of events. Bathsheba hears that her husband has died in battle, and she observes the customary time of mourning. And as soon as that mourning period ends, David immediately brings her to his house. She becomes his wife, and months later, she bears him a son. Now, on the surface, it looks like David pulled it off. He seems to have successfully covered his tracks and normalized the whole situation. To the completely unaware public eye, their king simply did a noble thing by marrying the widow of a fallen hero. But then, we hit the very final sentence of chapter 11. It's just a few words, but they change absolutely everything. The text says, "But the thing David had done displeased the Lord." It's such a profound, heavy reminder. David's cover-up might have worked perfectly on the people around him. He managed to manipulate Joab, he deceived the public, and he totally silenced the problem. But from the divine perspective, nothing is hidden. The chapter ends on this incredibly ominous cliffhanger, setting the stage for the severe consequences that we just know are coming.
Section 6. Lessons and Recap. The Moral Synthesis. Let's take a step back and synthesize what we've learned.
So what are the plain, practical takeaways from this step-by-step walkthrough? Well, the lessons here are actually super applicable to our own lives. First off, we see the absolute danger of idle time and being in the wrong place. David wasn't where he was supposed to be. He was relaxing on a roof instead of leading his people. And that one idle moment left the door wide open for disaster. Second,
We see this terrifying snowball effect. We see how one bad decision almost always requires another, even worse decision, just to cover it up. What started as a hidden affair escalated into complex deception and eventually straight-up murder. Third, we get a masterclass in what true integrity looks like through Uriah. His honor held firm even when nobody was watching, and even when his judgment was clouded by alcohol. Fourth, this chapter makes it crystal clear that worldly power, status, or authority does not excuse anyone from moral responsibility. And finally, the ultimate takeaway. No matter how complex or clever the cover-up might be, our actions simply cannot be hidden from the divine perspective.
Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.